welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. This is Jessica, and I am so excited to be welcoming back Deanna Raybourne to talk about a book so we've spoken 2 or 3 times about Veronica Speedwell, who we love, but you did drop something way back during one of our first ever chats, that you were planning a contemporary story about women who were retiring who were assassins, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what we're talking about today.
We are. I'm so happy to be joining you again.
Me too. So Killers of a Certain Age, as soon as it dropped on my desk as an ARC, I was like, it's here. And I just read it in one
Finally,
sitting.
it's been a while, right?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I'm going to drop something on Sunday. Every other Sunday, we've been doing something on the library's TikTok channel called what is it, like Sunday ARCs, where we drop a picture of an ARC we got of an upcoming book. And I think the song that I have playing in the background is that Lizzo song, It's About Damn Time.
Well, I think from start to finish, the whole thing was like 2.5 or 3 years. From kind of the inception of this book to the final absolute gotta have it finished deadline date where, this is it. We're going into production. It's got to be done. So it occupied a lot of time. I think there were 2 Veronica books written at the same time.
Yes,
and
we spoke about both of them.
Right, fitting in drafts for those books while I was working on my Killers. And it's been a long road to hoe.
So I loved it. It was so worth the wait. So please forgive me if I have this wrong. Is this your first contemporary fiction?
It is. I've got like 18 books in print maybe, and they're all historical. Everything is Victorian or 1920s. So this was a huge leap for me to do a contemporary. It was a way to push myself as a writer to do something that I was absolutely terrified of doing and absolutely not certain I could do. But it was a huge amount of fun.
Well, you did it, and you did it really, really, really well. I mean, wow.
Thank you, Jessica. That means a lot.
Yeah, I'm just... it was so, like I said, worth the wait. So talk about it. Where does the story come from? So there's 4 women. There is Helen, Natalie, Mary, Alice, and Billy, and they're all recruited in the 70s to be assassins. And then they're about to retire, and they find out that it's not that easy to retire from having been an assassin.
Exactly. They've worked together off and on. Like you said, they were recruited in 1979 when they were all about 21 years old. So they're turning 60 when the book starts. It actually opens with a flashback scene. So you get to see them on their very first mission together. And then we go into present day. And we get to see what's going on for them now, because they're ambivalent about retiring. When you've done the same job with the same company for 40 years, which is kind of rare these days, people don't really have a frame of reference for that, but that used to be the way of the world. They're wrestling with questions of, well, who am I if I don't have this career anymore? What am I doing with myself? What am I going to do with my days? And has it been a career well spent? And then all of a sudden, everything is thrown into chaos when they kind of have to band together, because the organization they work for would rather see them dead than let them retire.
They were so much fun to read. I really just loved it. It was just, first of all, I want to see this as like a TV series or a movie. It made me think a little bit when you started talking about it. It made me think a little bit of, there was that movie Red, I think it was called, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But this was like super, super fun. It was not like, it wasn't the same thing. It did have the idea of someone who was retired or retiring from this life of espionage and killing people, who supposedly deserved it. But it was fun, and it's fun to kind of see how like Billy is like, like sort of the central character who was originally like she wasn't necessarily the natural, but she became like the queen of assassins.
Well, I mean, we see that in the opening pages of the book where they go on this first mission, right? And everything's supposed to go according to clockwork, and it really doesn't. I mean, everything kind of starts to go wrong and hit the fan. And they've got to think on their feet and figure out how they're going to pull together as a team to bring off this assassination and avoid disaster. And they're also, I mean, potentially in some physical peril if they don't get this right. And Billy is the one who steps up during that first mission to say, we're a team of equals, but we need a little leadership here. And Billy is probably the last person to think of herself as a leader or to deliberately go after that role, but she's a natural at it. And so she just kind of slips in there by saying, okay, let's get it done. We've got to do this. And I think a lot of women probably have had that experience where you're in a situation and things just start to go awry and somebody's got to step up. And in this case, it's Billy who does that. So she's really the assassin that we follow the most throughout the story. Much of it is told from her perspective. And then we have some flashback scenes to earlier missions so we can see what they've done over the years and kind of some of the more interesting assassinations that they've pulled off.
So when did these characters kind of start to rattle around in your mind?
Oh, it was when I first started developing the idea for the book. I knew absolutely that I wanted it to be female centric because all of my books have a really strong female lead character. But then it occurred to me that this was the perfect opportunity to push myself, not just with a contemporary setting, but to look at the idea of developing multiple characters at the center of it, because I haven't done that before. I'll have my strong female, but then I've got like a hunky male sidekick and a whole bunch of found family characters who are quirky and eccentric. But this was a chance to really play with a quartet of women who are essentially equal. And how do those friendships, how does that dynamic work for them in a work setting? And, we have a lot of our culture kind of, we've got these examples of quartets of women, starting with Little Women, which most of us read when we're children. All the way through Golden Girls, you've got 4 women. Sex and the City, you've got 4 women. And so it was interesting to me to say, okay, when you look at all of these projects that have got 4 women at the core of it, you can kind of break down the personalities into archetypes. There's a wild child. There's a wayward one who can be your leader when you don't expect her to. There's your nurturing one. And so I wanted to really play around with those roles and see who each of these women was going to turn out to be and why each of them would come into such a traditionally masculine kind of overtly violent profession when none of them are people that you would look at and say, well, clearly you have issues. Clearly you're a person who kills for fun, because they don't kill for fun. They only kill as an occupation.
It's their job.
It is. They don't go around bumping people off, when somebody cuts them off in traffic. They only kill when they have a mandate to do it from the organization they work for.
Called the museum.
Yes,
that was fun. So where did the museum itself, did you do some like study of spies? Did this all kind of come from your head?
I did a lot of research on how the secret services, the clandestine services, were formed in the US and the UK after World War II. And, a lot of the efforts that came out, there were a lot of organizations that started during that war, doing kind of behind the scenes sabotage work and information gathering and everything else. And they had different outcomes after the war. Some of those organizations were rolled into official branches of the government or the military that we have now, and then some of them just disbanded completely. And so I started thinking, well, what happens if your organization has disbanded and you've got all these skills and maybe you were using them for 4 or 6 years during the war, depending on which theater you were in. And maybe you feel like that maybe justice wasn't completely served at the end of that war, because, so many Nazis got away and went underground. What if you thought, hey, I'm not going to settle down into kind of normal domestic life very well. This is what I've been trained to do now. Maybe I'm just going to go hunt some more Nazis. And I felt certain that these people would have friends who felt the same way. And so that's how the museum is born. It's a group of people who decided, we've got these skills. We can't go back to civilian life. Too many of these people have gotten away. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. We're just going to have to do it without a government mandate from anybody, because that's not a thing anymore for us. We've been cut loose, so fine, we're gonna go do this on our own. And so that's how the museum starts. And by 1979, when my assassins are recruited, there aren't nearly as many Nazis to be found. So the museum is kind of branched out, and they're targeting other people as well, kind of arms dealers and crooked judges and dictators and people who they say just need killing.
Yeah, I did I did like how it started in the 70s, and just like, I mean, the first mission, it was a lot of fun to read. Read how it went sideways, and you got like a really fun look at the different characters. But now they're retiring, and I like that they are, that they're post, some of them are postmenopausal, some of them are still going but not strong.
There is a hot flash that plays a pivotal role at the beginning of the book, because I mean, and you can tell that a menopausal woman wrote that, right? Because I was like, oh, I just want to peel my own skin off sometimes. And so I gave that to one of the characters. And another one's always popping her osteoporosis medication. And, they're not as young as they used to be, but they're also, at 60, they're not really ready to retire. They're not, they don't need walkers. They're not, kind of doddering little old women. They are vital, and they're strong, and they're experienced, and they have a lot going for them. And I think the idea of being, this mandatory retirement, this forced retirement at the age of 60, they're fighting back against a little bit. They're not entirely comfortable with being put out to pasture.
I think this is like the second book I've read this summer that has featured women of a certain age sort of coming into some sort of power. The other one was The Change by Kirsten Miller, which was more like a witchy book, where, they kind of found that their bodies were changing, but it was giving them powers. But this was really cool because this was just a different take on that, and it was extremely fun to read. And I just loved it. So I mean, one thing I do have to ask is, would you write another book with these characters?
All I can tell you about that is people are talking. Discussions are being had.
Talk about it.
Discussions are being had.
Excellent. Excellent. So do you have like a favorite of the quartet? Is there one that really jumped out at you, or are you just like, no, I love all of my children equally?
I really do love them all. They all touch something different for me. They all represent something different for me. I do have a particularly soft spot for Billy. I gave her a Texas background, like mine, even though I didn't grow up anywhere near Mejia, which is where she's from. And I grew up in a city, and, Mejia is a small place. Just that sort of cultural touchstone being the same, kind of gave me an in to her character. And it was done with great affection, because I haven't actually been able to do that with a character before. And kind of give them that same Texas background. So I guess somehow subconsciously I was saving it up for a character who would be very special, and Billy is that for me.
how did you choose their names? That's another thing I was kind of sort of imagining, like, I mean, I'm reading it and I'm just like, okay, this makes sense for this character in my mind. This makes sense for a character in another, in
Mhm.
but like, how did you choose everybody's name?
Well, Billy's name came from my favorite great aunt was named Billy. And I borrowed the name. I did not borrow any other aspects of her character, but I borrowed her name because she was a very kind of larger than life, dynamic, take no bull kind of Texas lady. So, and I miss her very much. So I borrowed her name for Billy. Natalie, I think, is just because every Natalie I've ever known personally has been something of a wild child. And so for me, that's what that name kind of has associations with, is somebody who you can just kind of rely on to bring the anarchy. And Helen, for me, it's a sort of classic patrician name, and that is our Helen. She is very much a Jackie Kennedy type. She's
I
very
mean,
kind of.
obviously, my mind goes Helen Mirren immediately.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking in
Impossible.
that
Yeah,
vein, but if you did, that's great. No, Helen is just she's kind of traditional Virginia East Coast classic town and country kind of background. And so for me, that was just a very classic sort of name for her. And Mary Alice, I loved the idea. I wanted them to have a double-barreled name. And Mary Alice, one of my dearest friends in the world, she does not go by the name of Alice, but that is her actual first name. And so I kind of tucked that in there as an homage to her.
yeah, I liked that. Like Mary Alice. So the double name thing, which you don't hear it as much around my area, at least.
Oh
I
no, it's very much a Southern thing.
is it
Yeah.
yeah, because I'm reading it, and like I've known some Mary Beths and so, yeah, but
Mhm.
like Mary Alice, what I loved about it was like two very proper names. Like it
Mhm.
wasn't like Mary and then something a little bit more like homey, or like a nickname, or it was Mary Alice, and you're just like, wow. So that's a lot of name
It
to
is,
be
and
carrying. I like
she's
her.
our
Yeah,
blonde bombshell of the group too.
yeah,
She's curvaceous, and she's the only one of the group who's happily married at
yes,
60.
yes.
So she's got a lot of interesting things going on in her life, does our
Yeah,
Mary Alice.
her spouse is not really aware of what her job is, but has some interesting speculations about it. I really don't want to talk too much about that because it was just very
Right.
funny, that whole
Right.
conversation.
Yeah. We can absolutely kind of skirt that issue and just let readers find out for themselves what goes on with that. But
Because
yeah, I mean,
that
and
was super funny.
that
Yeah.
was another thing, another question that I really played with is, if you do something like this, that is a very clandestine occupation, how much do you tell your spouse? And when do you tell your spouse? And this is something that each one of these four women has had to think about at some point, is, when do I share this with someone who's important in my life? And oh, and one character we haven't talked about yet is a male character by the name of Taverner. And I
Yeah, I
swiped.
wasn't sure if you wanted to talk about Taverner,
He is
or
he's a
yeah,
character who pops up, and I swiped his name from the English composer John Taverner, because
yeah.
he's a Baroque composer I happen to love. So I borrowed his name. And then I'm watching Slow Horses on Apple, which is a gorgeous adaptation, and they have a character named Taverner, and I about fell off my chair. And I'm wondering if Mick Herron did the same thing I did and thought, oh, John Taverner needs an homage.
That's so interesting, because I was like, wow, there are a lot of names out there, especially now, which, a name like that would probably have been an occupation like way back in the day,
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But that's one I hadn't heard of before, and I was like, ooh, Taverner.
I know. And here I am
Yeah.
thinking, oh, this is so unique. And then I find out Mick Herron's used it too. And I was like, damn it. But that, that's one of those things that happens from time
Yeah.
to time.
Yeah, no, I really just, it's such a fun book. It's a great ride. Everybody's going to just eat it up. It was so worth the wait. I'm
Oh,
just
thank you so
going
much,
to be
Jessica.
running around screaming at everyone to read this book.
Well, it was a tremendous amount of fun to write. And the whole goal of it was escapist joy. Just to let people have an adventure and a couple of hours where they could live in another world and fictitiously ride along while we kill people and have adventures. And that was the point.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I do hope people continue to talk. I know we have some more Veronica books on the horizon.
We do. Veronica number 9 is coming in. Is it Veronica number 9? No, Veronica number 8. Number 8 is coming, and see, I'm confused
Yeah.
right now because I'm developing Veronica 9, but Veronica 8 is ready to pub, and it will be out in March.
Very exciting. So I have to ask if you're reading anything fun right now.
So I just finished Amina Akhtar's Kismet, which is still freaking me out. I cannot even
One
talk
of
about
the
the crows.
best books. Oh my!
I am trying to process this. I
Yeah.
can't. Anytime I see a corvid now, when I'm outside the house, I'm like, I'm watching you. I am watching you.
Yeah, I had to explain to my husband what this thing was.
I feel like, and Amina and I follow each other on Twitter, and I haven't even told her yet, like, how flipped out I am. I'm still processing that book, and I finished it like 3 days ago. And I'm getting ready to start Janice Hallett's The Twyford Code. I very much enjoyed, there was another book of hers that I read, whose title escapes me right at the moment, but I really enjoyed it. And so I'm looking forward to reading this one because she's a very clever, kind of twisty mystery author.
Sounds great. Very cool. I'm gonna have to check that one out. I'm super excited that that you're recommending Kismet as well. Too, because I mean, again, that was like one of those books that I saw the cover and I'm like, ooh, this is really pretty. I want to, and then I saw what it was about and I'm like, well, I need to read it. And it just exceeded every single expectation I had.
Well, I literally started reading it when I was on my way to a wellness spa. And I stopped and went, nope, I'm not going to read this till I'm coming home. And I had to save it until I went home. I was like, okay, now I'm not, terrified someone's going to,
Yeah.
be the author of my demise while I'm out on a hike. So
yeah, that was
it was very
freaky.
atmospheric, and she did a gorgeous job with it. She really did. It was quirky and strange and really unique. I thought she just really crushed it.
It gives you food for thought. I mean, there were so many things about it that I'm reading it, and it just like took me some time to process, like you were saying, like just some of the things that happened. So hi,
Absolutely.
Amina.
And I just today got in my hot little hands the arc for the 3rd Finlay Donovan book by El Cosmano, and I'm really looking forward to reading that one because I enjoy the Finlay series quite a lot.
It's funny you say that because another librarian, our head of reference, who doesn't do podcasts, but he is a very, very big reader. I just recommended Killers to him about an hour ago, and he told me that if I haven't started reading the Finlay Donovan books, that I'm missing out. So
I feel like they're kind of natural book siblings in a way. So that'll be fun for you to read those books if you haven't read them yet.
Yeah. Did you actually? So this is one that I recently discovered, the Suburban Dicks series.
I'm not familiar.
Fun. Oh, those are fun. Yeah.
I am not familiar. I'll have to check those out.
Yeah, those are super fun too. The Self-Made Widow was the one that just came out, but Suburban Dicks was the first one, and it was super, super fun. This is me recommending to a mystery buff books that I think that he'd like. But yeah, that was funny that you mentioned Finlay right after we just had this conversation. So anyway, thank you so much. Well, please come back and talk about that and anything else you want to talk about ever.
Anytime. And it's always my pleasure to chat with Syosset Library.
Syosset Library loves Deanna Raybourne. All right. Well, so yeah, the book will be out very shortly. When's the pub date again?
It is September the 6th, the day after Labor Day.
Wow. So yeah, read it, enjoy it. And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.